My son George has always had a knack for attracting the unusual. From a very young age, he gravitated toward what many would call the weird kids. I have countless stories about his friendships, but one particular incident stands out, sharp and vivid in my memory, like a thorn that refuses to budge. It was during his 4th grade year, shortly after we relocated due to my husband's job reassignment. George, being an outgoing and friendly child, was quick to adapt to his new school. My husband and I felt confident he would make friends without any trouble. Our family was transitioning smoothly, and I was thrilled when I first met the parents of his classmates. They all seemed like upstanding, honest people. As the months passed, everything appeared normal. George was thriving academically and socially, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. However, one day, a phone call from the school shattered that sense of security. The principal requested that one of us come in to discuss an incident involving George and another student. My husband was at work, so I took it upon myself to meet with the principal. As I walked into the school, a swirl of emotions hit me: anger, confusion, and concern. Had George been in a fight? That would require punishment, but physical altercations were uncharacteristic of him. My heart raced as I picked up George and walked him to the principal's office, where he was unusually silent. Normally, he would chatter away, sharing every detail of his day. His silence was unsettling, and I wondered if he was embarrassed or scared. The principal asked George to sit in the waiting room, and I was led into his office. After taking a seat, the principal began with the kind of questions you'd expect. How was George's behavior at home? Did he listen? Was he respectful? I had nothing but positive things to say. George was an exceptionally well-behaved boy, and I was proud of him. Eventually, the principal revealed the reason for my visit. Apparently, George had gotten into a brief altercation with a classmate named Sebastian. I asked for details and learned that they were the last 2 students outside after recess. George had pulled an eraser from his pocket and struck Sebastian on the head, causing him to fall and scream. I was baffled. This was so unlike George, especially since he had spoken fondly of Sebastian. The principal admitted that no one witnessed the incident, but both boys confirmed the story. He reassured me that George wouldn't face any punishment since such skirmishes were common among kids. I left feeling somewhat relieved, though my mind was still racing. Why would George do something like that? What could have provoked him? On the drive home, George remained tight-lipped. It wasn't until bedtime that he finally opened up. Frustrated, I pressed him for answers. He explained that Sebastian had tricked him into playing a make-believe game of Street Fighter. George had pretended to knock Sebastian out with the eraser, and Sebastian had acted hurt, whispering that he would get George in trouble if he didn't play along. The teachers had mistaken it for a real fight. I was furious. My son had been manipulated and falsely accused. Instead of going through the school, I decided to confront the issue directly. That night, I found Sebastian's mother's number in the school directory and called her. Maggie, Sebastian's mother, greeted me warmly. She had already heard about the incident and claimed to have reprimanded Sebastian. As we talked, she shared that Sebastian had behavioral issues and sometimes acted as if he were another person entirely. My heart sank. I felt sympathy for her son but was also alarmed. Maggie suggested a sleepover to help the boys reconcile, and I thought it was a good idea. That weekend, I drove George to her house. He was back to his bubbly self, and Maggie seemed genuine. As the boys played in the basement, I enjoyed a glass of wine with her, sharing laughter and stories. The evening flew by, and I felt a sense of camaraderie with Maggie. Eventually, I couldn't resist asking about Sebastian's behavior. Maggie's demeanor shifted. She lowered her voice and confessed that Sebastian had trouble making friends and had seen several doctors. One psychiatrist had even suggested he might show signs of multiple personality disorder. My stomach churned as she revealed that they had moved twice because Sebastian had been expelled from school. I felt a mix of anger and concern. Why hadn't she been upfront with me? Just then, she begged me not to notify the school. Torn, I agreed to think it over but hung up feeling uneasy. The weight of her words lingered in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. That Monday, I learned that Sebastian had assaulted another student during recess. The school sent out a vague notice to parents, but the details were alarming. I tried to reach Maggie, but her phone had been disconnected. Days passed, and my curiosity turned into obsession. I drove to her house, only to find it completely vacated. No moving trucks, no signs of a rushed departure, just an empty home. I scoured the internet for any trace of them but found nothing. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Time passed, and George seemed mostly unaffected, perhaps having forgotten the incident. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What had happened in that basement? What kind of things had Sebastian been involved in since? Years later, I found myself reflecting on my own upbringing. I grew up in a Southern Baptist household where the supernatural was a topic of fervent belief, but demons were a certainty. My mother, however, had a more indifferent approach to faith. She struggled with addiction and mental health issues, often oscillating between being functional and unhinged. One night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, I woke to find my mother standing over me, just as she had in my dream. It was eerie, and she had no memory of it the next day. Weeks later, I witnessed her holding a large snake, a creature she had always feared, grinning as if it were a toy. When I confronted her, she dismissed it as a figment of my imagination, leaving me in a state of confusion and fear. That winter, during a church lock-in, I was jolted awake by rhythmic knocking. The pastor, the only one with a key, was asleep, and when he opened the door, he found my mother standing there, disheveled and mumbling. She walked toward me with an unsettling smile, and I felt powerless to resist her pull. When we got home, she was cheerful, oblivious to what had happened. But I was left haunted by the memories of that night and the strange occurrences surrounding her. Years later, my eldest son began sleepwalking, and I thought it was just a phase. But soon, my younger son exhibited the same behavior, mirroring his brother's actions. I felt a chill run through me as I realized they were unknowingly repeating the same eerie patterns. After some badgering, I eventually snapped him out of his trance. I guided him back to bed and tucked him in like I had done so many times before, trying to tell myself that it was just one of those things. Then, just like his brother, he outgrew it. No more sleepwalking, no more tapping. He had no recollection of it either. For years, I didn't think about it. In all honesty, I had forgotten about the whole thing. But there's a reason I'm writing this now. My sons are away at college now, and the house is a lot quieter than what I'm used to. Because of that, my husband and I have decided to renovate the house. The house is pretty old, and we've lived in it long enough that we decided to change things up, new floors, new paint, some fresh updates to make the place feel new again. It was all minor work, nothing too intensive. We were stripping the old wallpaper when we noticed something underneath. At first, I thought it was just some old backing or maybe a weird stain, but as we peeled more away, my breath caught. It was an old antique-style mirror, a mirror that had been covered for some reason. My first thought was, why the hell would someone cover a mirror instead of removing it? I felt ridiculous standing there staring at a piece of glass like it was going to do something, but I couldn't help but feel that we weren't supposed to find it, like it had been sealed away for a reason. That's when I realized the mirror was positioned in the exact spot on the wall where my sons had been bumping into all those years ago. The memories came flooding back, and I stood there in shock. There was no logical reason they should have known it was there. They couldn't have, and yet somehow both of them had independently been trying to walk into something that was impossible to see through the wallpaper. Forget about the fact that they were unconscious. I immediately got rid of that mirror, but I'm still pretty freaked out by the whole thing. There's got to be some kind of rational explanation for this, but I can't think of one. I still don't know what to make of this. I really don't. What truly happened in that basement? And what darkness lurked beneath the surface? These questions haunt me, twisting through my thoughts like an unending fog.